If you are thinking about starting a business in 2025 and you're looking for a little guidance on how to get you there, head over to secondactsuccess.co and book a call with me. Let's have a chat about your goals to see if I can better support you as you transition from where you are to where you want to be. Go to secondactsuccess.co and click on that green button to book a call or grab a link in the show notes below. I am excited to meet with you and to help you as you start your second act in 2025.
Strategy is never going anywhere. It's always going to be around. But the real magic is like when you learn to trust those creative downloads, and that's always what makes the best content.
Are you ready to quit your 9 to 5 job and start a business of your own? Well, you're in the right place, my friend. Welcome to the Second Act Success Career Podcast. I am your host, Shannon Russell. I am a former television producer turned business owner, career transition coach, and boy mom. My mission is to help you produce your best life. This podcast will teach you how to get from where you are now to where you want to be and how to build a business that fits your life and lights you up. Let's get started. Hey there, my friend. Welcome back to Second Act Success. Today, I am joined by copywriter and content strategist, Lindsay Smith. Lindsay began her career working for the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. She then ventured into advertising, and ultimately, she realized she wanted to work for herself. Now she runs Lindsay Smith Creativ. She shares her more than 20 years of knowledge with other small business owners so that they can change their relationship to creating content. Content is key, and that is what you need to grow your small business. So I'm excited to chat with Lindsay about her career journey and have her give us some really excellent advice on how we can use content in our businesses in 2025. Let's get to it. Lindsay Smith, welcome to Second Act Success. I'm so honored to have you here.
Oh, thanks, Shannon. I'm excited to come and chat with you always.
Yes, and I was just on your podcast, so we're just going back and forth, but I am so excited because we're in the same mastermind together, and so we know each other's businesses. But here on the show, I want to inspire listeners by hearing how other women have changed careers and started a business. So let's start from the beginning with you. You went to journalism school, is that right?
Yes, I did. So my second degree was in journalism. I wanted to write about manicures in restaurants.
Ooh.
However, here in Canada, we have the CBC, which is like our major broadcaster. They're on TV, they're on the radio. And so all of my journalism teachers were like ex-CBCers. So it was a 1 year program because I already had a bachelor's degree. So I did like a condensed 1 year program. And then I kind of was like, oh, when you're 20, you're like, I guess I'll go work for the CBC. So right out of school, I got a job at CBC Radio. I live in Canada. I'm originally from Montreal, but now I live in Hamilton, Ontario. I did my degree out east in the Atlantic provinces. And so I lived in Prince Edward Island, which is a very tiny little island of a province. And it's really only fun to go there in the summer. When it gets to be cold, everything shuts down. I worked there for a bit. I learned a ton. Even when I was there, I really wanted to do all the creative current affairs pieces. And my producers were always like, Lindsay, you have to do more news. You have to do more news. And to me, the news followed like a certain formula. Like this person said this person said this, and here's what's the plan for the future. And I really loved interviewing the most random people. I did one piece where I taped my microphone to the inside of the car, and I went to all of the drive-in coffee places or the drive-through coffee places, and I gave them a travel mug. I wanted to see who would pour coffee directly into the travel mug or who would waste a cup. This was like some random thing I had. Yeah, and I drove around talking to drive-through people.
How many people would pour
I
it
think
into your cup?
most people wasted a cup. It had something to do, and this was like pre-COVID, right? And they were young people, and I was always like, "Oh, are you gonna put the coffee in a cup first or in my travel mug?" And some people had it, and they were like, "Oh, I'm gonna put it in a cup first because something." Like everybody had a reason
Interesting.
for it. Anyways,
Okay.
that that's a
But that's
yeah. So
fun.
that's a
That's
fun,
like a fun project
super
to work
fun. Yes, those are the kinds of ideas that I would bring to the story meetings. And so
on.
then, fast forward a couple of years, I went back to Montreal and I accidentally fell into advertising. I met up with a girlfriend I went to high school with, and she was like, "Oh, I'm a copywriter." I was like, "What does that mean?" I had no idea what that meant. She told me about it. And I was like, that sounds cool. So I went to go meet some of the senior writers. And actually, I think the whole reason I got the job, at the time I had a flip phone and my ringtone was 90210. Dana,
Wait,
Dana, Dana.
wait, Lindsay, that was my ringtone for most of the 90s.
See,
That is so
whatever.
weird.
So my phone went off, and these two writers were like, "Oh my god, that's hilarious! Is that 90210?" I was like, "Yes," and I swear that's how I got a job, just because it was like a bond of 90210. So that was my first job in copywriting and advertising. I knew I was a good writer, but I don't think I knew exactly what that meant. Like I'd have a client service person come to me and be like, "Oh, can you check this sentence?" And I'd be like, "Why can't you check this sentence?" Right? Or like this
Right.
paragraph or whatever. I'd just be like, "What? Why can't you do it?" And they would be like, and I remember it was my friend Steph, and she was like, "Oh, we have to have a copywriter look over it." And I think that was like my first day. I was like, "Okay, it looks good, but I would like change this and that and that." She's like, "Okay, cool, thanks." And I just was like, doesn't everybody know how to do this? And then, it was my early 20s, and I eventually realized, oh, not everybody can do this. So I worked in advertising for like 12, 13 years. The way it works, a copywriter is traditionally is teamed up with an art director. You put them together and we just come up with a ton of ideas. And so to me, coming from journalism, I was like, you mean we just make up ideas? We don't have to like fact check them? So to me, I was just like, oh my God, so much freedom, right? So I like
Yeah.
most ridiculous ideas, like I think one of my first clients was like L'Oreal, but it was like a men's campaign. I came up with some like comic book idea. It was so ridiculous. So it was just like coming up with ideas all day long. And then fast forward to having some children and moving to Ontario. The advertising industry is, in my 20s and 30s, it was great. Like I was single. I could stay till 9 o'clock if I had to, or I could go home and work some more, right? Like I had nothing else. Um, but after I had kids, it just was not a super sustainable industry to work in, especially the commute I was doing. Like I was commuting 2 hours, there and back every day, like, an hour to work and an hour at home. It just wasn't sustainable anymore. So I kind of, I examined what it would look like for me to have a job outside of the house, and childcare and before and after care, more car seats for my husband's car, gas. And I just was like, my take home pay was just like kind of ridiculous. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I can do this on my own. So that's kind of how it came to be. I freelanced. I called myself a freelance copywriter for a very long time. And it was just like a lot of projects just sort of kept falling in my lap. And I just was like, sure, sure. Why don't you just transfer me this random amount? I don't even think I had a website. I built a random Squarespace website at some point, and I was like, okay. And I threw a bunch of logos on them of like the clients I was working with.
Yeah.
Then, my job sort of shifted. I was a copywriter, a content writer. Back in the day, it was called a community manager when you're managing a bunch of social media clients at once. You're scheduling stuff, you're creating content for people, you're writing captions, all that kind of stuff. And so I did that for other people for a very long time, creating content for other people. And then I noticed sort of something missing. And I was like, as good as a writer as I am, and as good as I am of coming up with all these creative ideas, me creating content for other people is never going to be as impactful as if someone is creating content for themselves, especially if it's a personal brand. So I noticed sort of a discrepancy, and I was like, I wonder if I could take all this 20 years of knowledge, the marketing, the blogging. I was a beauty blogger at one time. I have a lot of past secrets. Oh, and
Yes.
I was a yoga teacher too. And so I was kind of
Oh.
like, I wonder if I can take all of this knowledge and teach people what I know. That's kind of where I professionalized what I was doing. And it moved from like a freelancer to more of a like, okay, I'm going to really make this work. I still take on copywriting clients. I'm like absolutely a storyteller at heart. I love my copywriting clients. I like nerd out on copy big time. I just so happen to be really, really good at nurture content. So those are sort of my two paths, and I love it. I love it.
let's talk about that then. So, Lindsay Smith Creative is your business that
Yes.
you created, and now you take that experience, you can copyright for others, but you're teaching your clients how to do the content and the copywriting basically for themselves via email, website, all of it. Explain more
Yeah.
about how you work with your clients now and you use your past experience to really help them.
So there's a couple different things I do. My favorite is, I have a couple group programs. I'm working on something brand new to for the new year. But mostly people come to me because they have no idea what to say in their content, which, and when I say content, I'm looking at like the big picture. Usually when I say content, people immediately think social media, and they immediately think Instagram. For sure, Instagram is a great tool, right? But it's just one tiny little tool. When I'm talking about content, I'm talking about your website. I'm talking about this podcast. I'm talking about if you have a YouTube channel. I'm talking about blog posts if you have a blog. For sure, social media is part of it. Like, I'm talking about like your online presence as a whole. So when I'm talking about content, I'm talking about the big picture. My favorite is working one-on-one with clients. They come to me because they're overwhelmed. They have no idea what to say. They don't know, they're just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Most people have
Mhm.
like ghosted their email list, or they have like a bunch of drafts. So they're just like, I don't want to send them. I'm too scared. Right. So a lot of what I do, honestly, is like a permission piece. It's a lot of permission to be like, you don't have to listen to such and such guru who's like some 20-year-old dude who has knows nothing and has a
Mhm.
team of like 27 people, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to listen to what the gurus are telling you. This is the permission to create content differently, to use your creative intuition. When I worked in radio, my producers are always like, Lindsay, you're not going to find a story idea sitting at your desk. We didn't have smartphones then, but so much of us we're like this, right?
Yeah.
And we're scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. Listen, I do it too. However, you're not going to find your best ideas with your face in a screen. Like, that my best ideas come from when I'm walking the dog or when I'm in the shower, right? In the car randomly with no no music on and no children
No
yelling
kids.
at you,
Yeah.
right? Like those, it's when you give your brain a rest is when all those good ideas come from. And so a lot of what I do is just like the permission to trust those ideas, right? Yes, of course, strategy. Yes, absolutely. We talk about strategy. I just had a client recently, she wanted to launch a workshop. So we sort of worked backwards of like what she was going to talk about each week to give her sort of a
Mm.
strategy. Strategy is never going anywhere. It's always going to be around. It's going to shift and change, but the real magic is when you learn to trust those creative downloads, and that's always what makes the best content.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great explanation because it really is all encompassing and it's really how you want others to view you and your business and your services or your products. It's very intimidating, I think, for people who aren't as creative as you and, don't have your background. But I love that you're there to kind of help them, teach them, and guide them along so that they can get their ideas out there and realize
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be perfect in every email. I think I've learned that myself. It's if you have something to say, put it in an email and send it. Chances are the people on your email list are not always going to read your emails anyway, but you might have something that's a little different and a little off that will spark them wanting to read and scroll further.
Yeah,
So why not?
I tell this story a lot. When I was teaching yoga, I always wanted my husband to like either come to one of my classes or like come to yoga with me. And his whole deal was like, I can't go to yoga until I'm good at yoga, right? When I met him, he had done P90X. And he
Okay.
was like, yeah, so he was like super buff. And then, so for the 12 years we've been together, he's like, I'm going to start working out again. I'm like, it's been 12 years since I met you and it hasn't happened. Anyways, so to him, in his mind, he's like, I can't go to yoga if I can't touch my toes. Like, everyone's going to be looking at me. I was like, no one's looking at you. Everybody's worried about their own downward dog. Nobody's
Yeah.
looking at you. So it's like a blessing and a curse, right? As entrepreneurs, we're in our head a lot, right?
Mhm.
So you think if you put something out once, everybody's seen it, and it's like this idea of like taking your message, dropping it at someone's doorstep, and just being like, okay, bye, and like running away. And it's not that's not really how it works. So it's kind of like a blessing and a curse because nobody's watching as closely as you think, but also nobody's watching as closely as you think, right?
True, true. You could have stayed in freelancing and not
Mhm.
actually made this leap into being your own boss and, really truly having a business of your own because you were like, "Oh, I don't know if it's going to work." And it's that whole getting in your head again. And I think there's
Mhm.
a lot of my listeners probably who feel that tug inside when they're thinking about leaving that 9 to 5 and taking their skills and experiences and starting a business. Oh, what if it's not good? Well, you're not going to know if you don't try it. You
Yeah.
can figure out things as you go along, but it's taking that leap sometimes that like fulfills you and brings your life together to fit a little bit better.
Yeah. Entrepreneurship is not that glamorous. I feel like, and you probably feel the same way, like I'm unemployable now. Like, one, I don't have a portfolio. Like, if I wanted to go back to agencies, I don't have any portfolio to show what I've done. Two, also, I would have so much attitude. I'd just be like, don't you tell me what to do. Don't you know who I am? Right? Like,
It's so
I don't
true.
think I could do it.
Yeah.
Even, my last job in advertising, my creative director called me into his office and he was like, Lindsay, I feel like you don't have like that fire in your belly, this like desire to move up and succeed. And I was kind of like, because I don't. The last TV ad I made was for cold sore medicine. I'm very creative and I'm good at what I do, but it's like I don't want to stay here till 2 in the morning working on a pitch. Like that is not my life. And that's kind of
Mm-mm.
what was expected. And I just was like, I'm doing my job, but no, I don't want to like I didn't want to be him, was what I
Yes.
saw, right? Like I didn't want to be a creative director. And I have friends, like I see them on LinkedIn from 20 years ago that when I started in advertising, like I see them, they are creative directors now. And
Mm,
that's sure it's more money, but it's like double the hours.
yeah.
So I was kind of like, I don't see that for myself.
Mm-mm. That's the red flag that I think all the time is if you can sit there and know you're unhappy and then look and say, I don't want my boss's job. I don't want to move up, then that's your key that it's not right. I felt the same way in television. I don't want to be that boss in the corner office giving notes to all of the producers and staying late and having no life. And now looking back, the entertainment industry here in the US has changed a lot. And most of the people in those roles are men that I worked with 20 years
Uh,
ago. Because I
mhm.
think a lot of us were in Los Angeles and New York City, and you're doing that commute. And like me, like this is not a way to raise kids. And, it just didn't fit
It didn't
anymore.
fit.
And I think
Yeah.
that red flag, like you said, that's when you go, okay, well, why am I here?
Hmm.
Yeah, you're collecting the paycheck and it's good money. But sometimes you can think, well, why don't I take everything I've learned these last 20 years and start something on my own where I can get the kids off the bus and,
Yes.
work in my sweats or whatever and
Hmm.
still provide for my family.
Yeah, I don't knock my career. Like I loved it, but
Mhm.
because I was like 25 in my early 30s. I'm 45 now. It was such an awesome job at the time. Same as you, I got to travel. I got to
Mhm.
work on these fun projects, right? I loved the people I worked with. Everybody was super creative. Sometimes I think about the shoes I wore to work and I'm like, who was that person? Like now my like going out shoes are like my Blundstones. And I'm like,
Right.
who was this person who had these ridiculous high heel
Heels.
boots? I'm like, who was this? I don't know who
Yeah.
that person was, right? But like I think about it and I'm like, yeah, it was an incredible, incredible opportunity. But same as you, it just didn't fit anymore. It
Mm.
just, I kind of grew out of it and I absolutely love what I do. Sometimes I think every entrepreneur has this idea really once a week at this point that I'm like, what if I just go work at the Starbucks? What if I just go work at the grocery store? Right? Where it's like you're in and
Mhm.
you're out, your brain shuts off and you're done. But I kind of think I would come back to this every time because I'm obsessed with it, kind of.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm like a
Yep.
creepy stalker when it comes to like copyright or content. I'm like a right? Like I can't not talk about it. I can't not
Mhm.
do it. It's like part of my DNA now.
You asked, I listened. Many of you have been asking for more info on how to kickstart your second act business. So I created the How to Quit Your Job and Start a Business limited series podcast that will walk you through step by step How to go from employee to entrepreneur. Plus, I designed a free workbook to help you take action while you listen. Go now to secondactsuccess.co/listen to grab this free tool. Can't wait to share this with you. And how lucky are you that you can actually say, I loved my career? For you and I to say we loved our first act, we love that career. I look at it like you check the box, right? We did it. We have
Yes.
that experience for years, but now we can take that and create something else that we love and that we're obsessed with and that we're
Hmm.
creative and excited about. So we're very fortunate in that sense. But I think for a lot of people, if they are sitting here, maybe they don't like their job, and they're thinking about venturing into a business, I love your advice because I often think you can dig down into the things in that job that you may not like, but the skills or the duties that your role entails that you do like, and take those out and look for something where you can still use those in a way where you can feel fulfilled. And
Hmm.
I'm wondering if when you were starting to create your business, how you went ahead and did that and kind of put those boundaries so that it was you weren't leaping into the same thing again.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? And I think, in the early days when I was freelancing, I worked with a lot of agencies, and it was very different being on the outside because it was, like any full-time job, there's a lot of politics, there's a lot of, in advertising, it was very much like who gets the good projects, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And the best teams got the best projects or the best clients or whatever. And so there was a lot of that. But being on the outside, it was like a kind of a breath of fresh air because I still got to do what I loved, but I was not part of the, I don't want to say toxic culture. I mean, I'm for sure that I
Just
worked with
the
toxic people, but
machine,
I just,
right? The
yeah, the machine. I wasn't part of the political
Yeah.
nonsense of being in the agency, right? So I still got to do what I love, tell
Mhm.
stories, use words, and really use my brain to, like, copywriting it like you're solving a puzzle. So I love that part of it. And then I would get to submit it to the agency and say, see you bye. So that
Yeah.
part I really loved. Um, and even now, I've worked for myself for, my oldest is going to be 11. So I guess I've worked for myself for like almost 11 years. And even now, I feel so um, lucky to get to work with the clients that I get to work with. Still open to working with agencies for sure. However, there's something different when you get to work on someone's personal brand. It's different than working on, Tim Hortons or Garnier or Red Bull. It's something
Mhm.
different. And I get super excited.
Mhm.
Again, I nerd out when I get to like rewrite somebody's web copy. I just got a new copy client this week. She's so super creative. We had like one call together. I took a page of notes and I looked at her website, and in my head I just was like, "Oh my god, we're going to create such an awesome website." And to me, I just want this person to be super successful. So,
Yeah.
like that's where it kind of comes from. I'm like, yes, I absolutely nerd out on the process and the solving of the puzzle of copywriting and content. But really, working with someone who that's their livelihood, I'm kind of like, I just want you to be really successful, and I want you to have a website or email marketing plan that you feel really proud of and excited to send and to
Mhm.
share links with people. Like that to me is like, that's way better than like the political machine that I worked in when I was
Mhm.
20.
Right, you can pick your clients, you can pick what you're working on,
Hmm.
and then you can see, like, if there was a listener of mine that was ready to launch that business and they have these ideas in their head, but they don't know how to put it out in a story form on a website to make it actually tell what they're offering. You're that person who can sit there and get their ideas and put it into a structured format so that
Yeah.
someone can go on that website and really see them, and that's such a
Mhm.
valuable tool, and you must get such pride out of seeing your clients succeed in that way.
Yes, absolutely. Most of us start a business because we're really good at something and we want to help other people. Like, I think that's why most of us get into entrepreneurship. And I'm sure that's probably why a lot of your clients come to you because they're not making the impact they are in a full-time career or a corporate career, and they're just like, to me, it's just like they want more. Like there is more out there. For any of your listeners, whatever it is you do, there are transferable skills. There's so much of it. And even if your business idea is crocheted bookmarks, right? Whatever it is, like so much of whatever they're doing now, there are transferable skills. Um, and I think it starts with the talent, absolutely. And then the other stuff you can learn, the marketing, putting in systems, accounting. Well, don't learn accounting. We love accountants, but that part can be learned. Somebody said to me once, they were like, if you have the drive, that is more than 80% of other entrepreneurs. If you have the drive to want to succeed, then you're already ahead of the game. To any of your listeners, if you have the drive, you're already ahead of the game. The safety, right? There's something to be said for safety. Like all of us want that. Absolutely. Like safety is safe, a paycheck, a pension, insurance. All of these things are important. All of us want to feel safe. I think for anybody listening, if you just have like this little seed of an idea that you just can't get rid of, then it's worth exploring it. It's the little seed of the idea is never going to go away. It's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. That's what I think.
Yep, don't ignore it. And that drive, I think, is what makes you hustle and what makes you and I on those weeks where we're like, ugh, it's just not working, or we're feeling like, the ebbs and flows are
Mhm.
down, that drive is what keeps us going. We don't want to go back to that. We're going to make this work. And that's where that hustle really comes in. You and I both have podcasts. I want to talk about your incredible podcast, which I love listening to, called Content Magic. Tell us about your show.
My belief is that content is really a combination of strategy, intuition, and creativity. Those are kind of like the three pillars of content that one feels good to you and also connects with your people. Because I think the best compliment you could ever get on your content is somebody being like, oh my God, are you in my brain? Right? It's people
Yeah.
feeling seen. Like the best comments you can ever get are like, oh my God, you're so right. That's the kind of, when people talk about engagement, that's the kind of engagement you want. You want your people to know that you get them. And that kind of takes like a mishmash of things. I do work with clients who are like very, very strategic, very like tick, 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 right? And then sometimes it just takes a little nudge to be like, just trust the creativity. I said to a client once, I was like, just have more showers in the day. If that's where you get your good ideas, just keep showering. So that's kind of my belief. We can look at metrics, we can look at numbers. Those do serve a purpose, right? But I think so many of us got caught up in that stuff more than we need to. We can look at different pillars. I think we can look at like lenses, like what is your intention here? Do you want to entertain? Do you want to nurture? Do you want to educate? I think that's what we need to look at, right? Rather than like, oh, this week I'm going to post a Tip Tuesday and a Wisdom Wednesday. Like, if that works for you, amazing. But
Right,
it
right.
doesn't have to be quite that stringent. And also, here's another thing. Now that I'm on a rant, um,
Yeah. Keep
this is the
going.
other thing. um, this idea that you have to show up in your content 97, 11 billion times a day. Like,
Mm,
this is nonsense. There are times when I have nothing to say. And I'm sure there are times when you have nothing to say and when your listeners have nothing to say. It's okay. And
yeah.
you can take a week off. You don't have to be on Instagram every single day, and you don't have to show up and be like, "Sorry guys, I was MIA." No.
No.
Nobody knows. And also, it's normal. It's normal to take a week off. And
Yeah.
that's the other thing too, right? You go cuckoo if you're posting stuff every single day, you're sending emails 17 times a week, like you go cuckoo. Go walk your dog. Go have
Mhm.
a shower. Go play in the snow. Go do
Yeah.
something else because that's when the ideas are going to come.
Thanks for giving us permission, because that is, I think, what stresses anyone out, entrepreneurs especially, that are just like, oh, do I have to log in? Do I have to be on this app again? And then you're posting things just for the sake of posting it, and it's not getting you anywhere, and it's not showing truly what your talents are and what you can
Mhm.
offer. So thank you. I needed to hear that. And I'm sure a
Okay,
lot of
good.
people listening
Okay,
did.
good.
I'd love to ask you before we finish our conversation, if there is someone who is ready to start their second act, what advice do you have for them?
I think to be patient, it's the long game. We live in this world of instant everything. We think everything is supposed to come immediately, right? Maybe 5, 6 years ago, we lived in a time where you could just be like, DM me the word da da da, and you would get sales, right? That time is over. It's the long game. It does take time to grow. And I think making mistakes is probably the best thing you can do. I also think don't take it so seriously, or don't take yourself so seriously. This tiny little squares in our phone, don't let them rule your life. It's a tiny square in your phone. When you think about it, it's kind of ridiculous. Like they have
Mhm.
all this power over us, and that's all it is. So I think be patient, um, have a sense of humor, and don't be afraid to make mistakes because I think, and again, your mistakes, people are not watching that closely. People probably don't know that you're making mistakes. People don't
Mhm.
know that if you launch something and it's like a flop, people don't know. So
Yeah.
don't worry about it and just keep going. You don't really know what your mission and your values are until you come up against something that crosses the boundary, right? That's where the learning happens, is kind of like the screwing up or the failed launches or the whatever it is, or not letting 20 people into your Zoom room because you're too busy talking, right?
Right,
So,
yes.
and all of us have those stories. All of us have those stories. Like all
Mhm.
of the Sarah Blakeleys and the Mel Robinses and the whatever, they all have those stories of screwing up
Mhm.
somewhere. That's where the success comes from. Like you think of it of like learning to ride a bike. How many times, your
Right.
kids or yourself, like how many times did you like, or like learning to ski, like any of
Yeah.
these things, how many times did you wipe out? it's
Yeah.
it's kind of the same thing, right? And I think we lose that as grown-ups. We sort of lose that courage as grown-ups because we know too much now.
Yeah. We think we have to be perfect from day one,
Yes.
and it's
Just be a
not.
toddler, man. Start a business and be
Enjoy.
like, what would a toddler do?
Right. That's what we have to start asking ourselves.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
and it's a journey. Oh, Lindsay, such great advice. I'd love to ask you how everyone can get in touch with you. What are the best places to follow you?
Instagram and Threads is where I hang out the most. I'm at Lindsay Smith Creative, AY Lindsay. My website is lindsaysmithcreative.ca. I always love chatting in the DMs, so send me a message if you want to chit chat about content and copy. I legit nerd out on it, so I love to talk about it. Thank you for having me, Shannon. This is lovely.
Thank you. This was so much fun. I really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. I hope you found some gems of inspiration and some takeaways to help you on your path to second act success. To view show notes from this episode, visit secondactsuccess.co. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode. Reviews only take a few moments and they really do mean so much. Thank you again for listening. I'm Shannon Russell, and this is Second Act Success.